Okay, so I did my um, project on the Peak Relational Training System. So what we're going to talk about tonight is what is Peak. We're going to talk about the observation that I did. We're going to talk a little bit about the resources that I used and my reflection of this project. So what is Peak? Peak stands for Promoting the Emergence of Advanced Knowledge. It also involves teaching skills in a certain way so that the learners hopefully will be able to generalize and learn the skills more easily. Um, the way these skills are taught, hopefully they will generalize to, across people, settings, um, skills. It's not just, okay, we're learning this skill a day. It's learning this skill so we can build on another skill. Um, the Peak system, they have 4 different modules. The 4 different modules are the DT module, which is the discrete trial module, the generalization module, can't talk, the equivalence module, and the transformation module. Um, the way they collect data is using performance matrices that baseline and track progress over time. So let's get into my observation. So the reason I chose this participant is because he is relatively new and he's also showing tremendous progress with the Peak DT module and will hopefully be getting ready to integrate some Peak generalization module into his program sometime soon. Where did this observation take place? I work at Momentum Behavior Analysis in Crossville, and that is where I did my observation. The people that were present were the BCBA, me, and the client. The client is 9 years old. He has been diagnosed with a developmental delay and a language disorder. The length of my observation was about 20 to 30 minutes. The interactions that I saw with the BCBA and the client were more building rapport since he's still relatively new. The BCBA was still working on building rapport with him. She didn't really start off with bam, 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 back to back tasks. She intermixed tasks with fun stuff that he really liked. And then after about 10 minutes of that, it was time for the client to work for his tokens. From what I noticed, the BCBA and the client have a great relationship. The session flowed pretty well, and even though the client was engaged in activities that he didn't prefer, didn't really want to do, he was still enjoying time with the BCBA. All right, moving right along. The procedures and data for this observation. The procedures that I observed being used were a 10-point token economy. The BCBA also used antecedent modification by situating the client a certain way in the room so he could not bang his head against the wall, which is one of his problem behaviors. She provided reinforcement contingent on a behavior. So about every fourth response, she would deliver a check mark on the token board that they were using. She also used differential reinforcement of an alternate behavior and differential reinforcement of an incompatible behavior. Prompt fading and manipulation of establishing operations by deprivation were also evident in the observation. The BCBA used the Premack principle, the first then principle, first do this, then you can have the preferred tangible. She also used self-calming in this setting. I have never seen or observed a client with a self-calming procedure in place, so that was interesting to see. The way that she recorded data was in an app called Catalyst. We don't use the data sheets provided by Peak just because it's easier in our environment to have the iPad and carry it around and collect data using the Catalyst app. They list the different prompts used by ordering them in the prompt hierarchy, and you just select the skill, and then you will choose the most intrusive prompt that you had to use to get the child to complete the skill. If the client did not get an independent response the first time, the BCBA presented a mastered skill like clap hands, motor imitation to build the behavioral momentum, and then a correction trial was performed. And usually it only took one correction trial for this specific client to reach an independent on the first or after that. All right, assessment and program planning. Which assessment was given? This client was given both the DT assessment and the generalization assessment. The results were recorded using the performance matrix. Both of these assessments were used to build on the skills that the client already had in his repertoire and the skills he needed to achieve to complete the PEAK matrix to be on target with children that are the same age as him and that are typically developing. All right, getting into the resources. So my first article was titled Targeting Staff Treatment Integrity of the PEAK Relational Training System Using Behavioral Skills Training. So the rationale for this article was that I wanted to know more about how it affected the learners if the clinician was trained or not trained to use the PEAK modules. So the methodology for this article, they used 6 paraprofessionals that had a year or less of ABA experience. None of them had over a year of experience. Procedures for the study were the learners participating in a baseline PEAK assessment, and then the staff participated in a behavioral skills training to further their knowledge and skill of administering the PEAK DT module. The findings of this study, they had found that after the staff had received the behavioral skills training on PEAK DT, the learner, their performance was drastically increased, and this showed that the skills and knowledge of the program does affect the performance of the learner. So that staff who are implementing PEAK, any of the modules, need to be specifically trained before they start implementing this curriculum, because it really does affect the learner's ability to learn the skills, and not only that, but maintain the skills. So the expansion of the work, I would like to see if the learner would make as much progress after having a clinician that was trained in PEAK DT and then having a clinician that was not trained using PEAK DT, not trained in using PEAK DT. The second article that I chose was evaluating the efficacy of the PEAK relational training system using a randomized controlled trial of children with autism. So the rationale for this article was that pretty much I just wanted to know the efficacy of PEAK with children that have autism. The methodology for this article, there were 40 preschool aged children that participated in this study. They mainly focused on efficacy of the DT module. They didn't have any other modules in this article. The children that participated in the study only had a diagnosis of autism. All students had to have a goal in their IEP for instruction on language skills. 4 of the children were excluded from the study due to the severity of their problem behaviors and being very distracted. The assessment and training were actually held in a classroom at the school. It was either in part of a classroom or a totally different classroom altogether. And then they used the PEAK-DT assessment and curriculum during the study. The findings of this study, the authors, they found that when the children were exposed to the curriculum, their score on the assessment increased. So they would take the baseline, then they would be exposed to the curriculum, and then they would take the pre-assessment again to see if their scores increased. And they found that they did. And one thing that the authors mentioned was that even though the findings of the study were very significant, there were some limitations to the study. So some limitations that they had listed were a sampling error. They didn't use a big enough sample of children. There were a lot of variables like levels of functioning, severity of problem behaviors, and the diagnosis. They listed that all those could have been limitations to the study. The expansion of this work, I would like to find out if the findings for the study would be the same across all PEAK modules. The last article that I chose was Teaching Complex Verbal Operants with the PEAK Relational Training System. My rationale for this article was verbal operants are one of the main goals for this child, and the BCBA wants him to learn more complex verbal operants. So the methodology for this was the author selected participants based on their performance on the PEAK-DT assessment. They used a total of 3 children in the study. The training took place at a school, and it lasted between 10 and 40 minutes each session. And the stimuli that they used was PEAK-DT specific, so like planets, and they also used specific reinforcers related to the child. And the authors of this study actually used the data collection form that's provided in the PEAK system. The findings of this study were that PEAK was very effective in teaching targeted skills to mastery, and it was very effective in the children or the learners maintaining the skills at the follow-up, which was about 2 weeks after they had been exposed. The expansion on this, I would like to continue observing this specific client just to see the maintenance and the mastery and generalization of the verbal operants that he is going to acquire. The reflection of this project, it was a very, very useful project for me. I didn't know it would be as informational as it was. It helped me tie together the assessment and the curriculum that we're using at Momentum to research that shows that it's successful. So that means that, to me, it means that what we're using is actually working. And that is a great thing. And these are my references.